Ethan had always prided himself on his ability to remain composed in high-pressure situations. As a diplomat for the Intergalactic Federation, he had negotiated peace treaties, brokered trade deals, and resolved countless conflicts between alien species. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to experience on his latest mission. He had been called to the distant planet of Voria, a world known for its lush landscapes and advanced technologies. The invitation had come directly from the Council of Queens, an influential body of rulers that governed multiple star systems. The request was simple enough. Ethan was to attend a Grand Council meeting and help facilitate talks between two rival factions. But upon his arrival, he quickly realized that there was far more at stake than mere politics. As he descended in his shuttle, the planet's atmosphere shimmered with an otherworldly glow. Voria's sprawling cities lay beneath him, their towering spires stretching up like the fingers of giants. Ethan marveled at the sight, but his excitement was tempered with the knowledge that he was stepping into a situation he knew little about. He had barely landed when a delegation of guards and attendants met him at the shuttle's hatch. Their golden armor gleamed in the sunlight and their faces were stern yet welcoming. They escorted him through the grand halls of the palace, a structure that seemed to breathe with the pulse of the planet itself. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings depicting battles, victories, and legends, an indication of the planet's long and storied history. Ethan was led into a vast chamber where the Council of Queens had gathered. At the center of the room stood Queen Lyra, the first of the two monarchs he was to meet. She was a vision of grace, her silver hair flowing like a waterfall down her back, her icy blue eyes sparkling with intelligence. She wore a regal crown, adorned with sapphires, and her armor, while elegant, was designed for both beauty and power. Lyra's presence was calm and soothing, her aura one of serenity and wisdom. As she stood to greet him, Ethan felt a sense of peace wash over him. This was no ordinary queen. Lyra exuded an otherworldly energy that made him feel as if he were in the presence of something divine. "Welcome, Diplomat Ethan," she said, her voice soft yet commanding. "It is an honor to have you here on Voria. We trust that your expertise will help us find the path to peace." Before Ethan could respond, the doors to the chamber suddenly swung open, and in strode Queen Zara. Unlike Lyra's composed and graceful presence, Zara's arrival was a whirlwind of energy. She was tall, with dark purple hair that cascaded like a storm cloud around her shoulders, her violet eyes burning with intensity. Her golden armor was adorned with sharp edges, reflecting the fierceness of her spirit. Zara's gaze immediately locked with Ethan's, and for a moment he could feel the electricity in the air. The tension between the two queens was palpable, and Ethan instinctively understood that this was no ordinary diplomatic mission. These queens weren't just rulers, they were rivals, and their competition for power was personal. "Ethan," Zara's voice was strong, almost challenging, "I'm glad you could join us. I trust you'll be impartial in this delicate matter. Unlike some others, I don't believe in the illusion of peace." The contrast between Lyra and Zara couldn't have been more striking. Lyra radiated calm and empathy, while Zara projected strength and ambition. Ethan found himself caught between the two, his professional mind already starting to analyze the dynamics at play. But on a deeper level, there was something more, an emotional pull that he couldn't quite understand. The council meeting began, but Ethan couldn't focus on the discussions about trade routes and resource allocations. Instead, his mind kept drifting back to the two queens, their contrasting personalities, and the subtle yet undeniable tension between them. As the meeting continued, Lyra spoke with eloquence and grace, proposing solutions that were rooted in diplomacy and mutual understanding. Zara, on the other hand, argued for a more forceful approach, one that would not shy away from confrontation if necessary. The two queens presented their views with passion, but neither one seemed willing to back down. Ethan's role as a neutral mediator was clear, but he couldn't help but feel torn. He had dealt with countless alien species before, but never had he faced such an emotional dilemma. His professional instincts told him to remain impartial, but his personal feelings were beginning to stir. How could he remain neutral when two Such powerful and captivating women were vying for his attention, and possibly his heart. The discussions continued late into the evening, with neither queen willing to give ground. But as the night wore on, something unexpected happened. Queen Lyra, sensing the growing tension, turned to Ethan with a soft smile. "You must be tired from your long journey," she said, her voice gentle. "Perhaps you would like to retire for the evening and rest? Tomorrow, we can continue our discussions." Ethan, grateful for the reprieve, agreed. But as he left the council chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that his arrival on Voria had been anything but coincidental. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission. It was the beginning of something much more complex. Something that would test not only his skills as a diplomat, but also his heart. As the doors closed behind him, Ethan glanced back at the two queens. Their gazes locked across the room. The rivalry between them was far from over, and Ethan realized that he was now a part of their world, a world where love, loyalty, and power collided in ways he couldn't yet understand. But one thing was clear: his life and the fate of both their planets would never be the same again. Ethan's first night on Voria was restless. His dreams were filled with visions of two powerful queens, each vying for his attention, each determined to win his loyalty. When he awoke the next morning, the weight of his situation seemed heavier than ever. He had come to Voria as a neutral diplomat, but now he was entangled in a web of emotions, politics, and power plays that he could not easily escape. The morning sun bathed the palace in golden light as Ethan made his way to the Grand Council Hall for the second day of discussions. He could feel the tension in the air before he even entered. The two queens were already seated at opposite ends of the long table, their eyes locked on one another with silent but unmistakable hostility. It was clear that their rivalry was not just about politics, it was personal. And now Ethan was right in the middle of it. Queen Lyra was the first to greet him. She rose from her seat with grace, her silver hair shimmering in the soft light. "Good morning, Ethan," she said, her voice calm and soothing. "I hope you rested well." Ethan nodded, trying to mask the unease he felt. "Yes, thank you. I'm ready to continue our discussions." But as he took his seat, his eyes were drawn to Queen Zara. She was glaring at him, her violet eyes filled with a mix of challenge and something darker, something that made Ethan feel both intrigued and wary. Zara was beautiful in her own right, but there was an intensity about her that was impossible to ignore. Unlike Lyra, whose presence was serene and inviting, Zara's was commanding, almost overwhelming. As the council meeting began, the queens wasted no time in diving into the heart of the matter. Lyra spoke of peace, cooperation, and mutual benefit, urging the council to prioritize diplomacy over conflict. Her vision was one of unity, where both planets could thrive together in harmony. Ethan could see the sincerity in her eyes, the depth of her care for her people. She wasn't just a queen, she was a leader, someone who believed in the power of unity and collaboration. But Zara's response was far more forceful. "Diplomacy is all well and good, but it's not enough," she declared, her voice sharp and confident. "Sometimes we must fight for what we deserve. Our worlds are at risk and we cannot afford to wait for things to fall into place. We must take action." Zara's words sent a ripple of unease through the room. Ethan could sense that this wasn't just a debate. It was a battle of ideals. Lyra's approach was one of patience and understanding, while Zara's was one of strength and decisiveness. Both had valid points, but as a neutral mediator, Ethan found himself at a crossroads. He understood the importance of strength, but he also knew the power of diplomacy. As the meeting continued, Ethan realized that the queens were not just competing for control of their planets, they were also competing for his heart. Every word they spoke, every gesture they made seemed designed to sway him in their favor. Lyra's subtle smiles and gentle touch contrasted with Zara's fiery stares and bold challenges. It was clear that the stakes were higher than he had imagined. This wasn't just a political negotiation. It was a test of loyalty, strength, and, ultimately, love. Later that day, Ethan was invited by Queen Lyra to join her for a private tour of the palace gardens. The invitation seemed innocent enough, but as they walked through the lush greenery, Lyra's voice grew more serious. "You must understand, Ethan," she said softly, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "My people have been through much. We have fought wars, suffered losses, and rebuilt time and time again. I seek peace not only for my world, but for all worlds. A world united in strength, but also in compassion. You must see the importance of this, not just for Voria, but for all of us." Ethan listened carefully, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He could feel the sincerity in her voice, the quiet strength that came from a leader who had seen the struggles of her people firsthand. She wasn't just trying to win him over with charm. She was trying to show him the heart of her kingdom. But just as the moment seemed to reach its peak, they were interrupted. A messenger arrived with urgent news. Zara had called for a meeting in the council hall, and she demanded that Ethan attend. Her message was clear. She wasn't going to wait for Lyra's peaceful negotiations to work. If Ethan didn't come to her side, she would take matters into her own hands. The tension in the air was palpable as Ethan made his way to the council hall, torn between the two queens. When he arrived, Zara was waiting for him, her eyes blazing with intensity. "You've spent enough time listening to her," Zara said, her voice filled with a mixture of frustration and determination. "Now it's time for you to see the truth. Peace is an illusion. Power is what drives the universe forward. Join me, Ethan, and together we can rule this galaxy. We'll take what's rightfully ours." Ethan stood frozen, caught between the two queens, each offering him a different vision of the future. Lyra's path was one of peace and unity, while Zara's was one of strength and conquest. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, knowing that whatever choice he made would have consequences not just for him, but for entire civilizations. As the meeting ended, Ethan was left to contemplate his next move. The test of strength and loyalty had begun, and he was no closer to choosing between the two queens. But one thing was clear: he was no longer just a diplomat caught in the middle of a political dispute. He was a man torn between love, power, and duty. And as the days passed, the test would only grow harder. The stakes had been set, and Ethan knew that his heart and the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. The days on Voria were starting to blur together. Ethan found himself caught in a whirlwind of meetings, discussions, and private encounters with both queens. The diplomatic mission that had once seemed like a simple assignment had turned into something far more complex, emotionally and politically. He had come to mediate between two powerful alien queens, but now he was tangled in a personal battle that threatened to unravel everything he thought he knew about loyalty, love, and duty. The tension between Queen Lyra and Queen Zara had reached a boiling point. Each day they pushed him further into their world, each one trying to prove that their way was the right way, both for their people and for his heart. Ethan could feel the weight of their expectations, and with each passing moment, his own feelings became more muddled. He was supposed to be the neutral mediator, but how could he be impartial when his heart was beginning to lean toward one of them? The struggle was tearing him apart. It was late one evening when Lyra invited him to her private garden, a peaceful retreat she often escaped to when the pressures of ruling became too much. The garden was a stunning sight, filled with blooming flowers that glowed under the Voria sun and exotic trees with leaves that shimmered like silver. The air was thick with the fragrance of rare blossoms, and the gentle hum of the planet's wildlife created an atmosphere of calm. "Ethan, thank you for joining me," Lyra said, her voice soft but sincere. She turned to face him, her silver hair flowing gently in the wind. Her eyes, so pale and wise, held a mixture of kindness and vulnerability. "I know you've been under a lot of pressure lately. I can only imagine what it must be like for you, torn between two worlds, two queens." Ethan nodded, his throat tightening. "It's been difficult," he admitted, unable to mask the rawness of his feelings. "Both of you have such powerful, compelling visions for your people. I don't know how to choose." Lyra smiled gently and stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "You don't have to choose, Ethan," she said. You only have to listen to your heart. I know that's not always easy, but the heart knows what it needs. Sometimes it's just a matter of acknowledging what's already there. Her words, though kind, felt like a subtle challenge. Was she trying to make him feel guilty for not choosing her? Or was she simply offering him a way out, a way to step back from the struggle and find his own truth? Ethan wasn't sure, but in that moment, he felt something stir deep inside him. Lyra's presence was calming, like a warm embrace in the midst of a storm. He could see the goodness in her heart, the dedication to her people, and he realized that she truly cared for him, not as a diplomat, but as a man. But just as the moment seemed to deepen, a sudden disturbance broke through the silence. The mob palace guards appeared, carrying an urgent message. Ethan's heart sank as the guards informed him that Queen Zara had called for an immediate meeting. She was demanding his presence. The urgency in their voices left no room for argument. Without a word, Ethan followed the guards back to the council hall, his thoughts racing. Was it possible that Zara had been watching from a distance, sensing the bond forming between him and Lyra? Or was this just another attempt to sway him, to pull him back into her world of action and power? As he entered the chamber, he was met by Zara's fierce gaze. She was standing at the head of the table, her arms crossed, her posture commanding. "I see you've spent the day with her," Zara said, her voice low but filled with a certain edge. "I'm sure she's convinced you that peace is the only answer, that diplomacy is the way forward. But let's be honest, Ethan, peace is a fragile thing. It can be shattered in an instant. You can't let yourself be blinded by that illusion." Ethan felt the weight of her words settle over him like a shadow. He had always admired Zara's strength, her unyielding will, but now there was something darker in her tone. She was right about one thing. Peace was fragile. But was her approach really the answer? Was strength and conquest the only way to ensure stability in the galaxy? Or could unity and compassion hold the key? "Zara," Ethan said softly, trying to steady his emotions, "I haven't chosen a side. I've tried to understand both of your perspectives. I'm not blind to your strength, but I also see the beauty in Lyra's vision for peace. I just don't know how to choose." Zara's expression softened for a moment, but the intensity in her eyes remained. "You don't have to choose, Ethan," she said, her voice softer but no less powerful. "You only have to trust yourself. You have the power to shape the future. Together we can build a galaxy where strength and justice rule, not weakness and compromise." Her words resonated deep within him, but they also filled him with a sense of fear. Was Zara's vision truly one of strength, or was it born from a desire for control? Was her approach the only path to a better future, or was it a dangerous road that would lead to destruction? The struggle within Ethan intensified. In the quiet moments of the night, when the galaxy outside seemed so distant, he found himself replaying his encounters with both queens in his mind. With Lyra, he had felt peace, security, and a deep connection to something greater than himself. But with Zara, he had felt the thrill of power, the undeniable pull of her strength. Both queens offered him something he could not ignore, and yet both paths seemed to lead in different directions. One towards peace and understanding, the other towards dominance and control. As the days passed, Ethan felt himself pulled in two different directions, his heart struggling to reconcile the feelings he had for both queens. He had spent years of his life negotiating treaties and resolving conflicts, but now he found himself facing a personal dilemma that seemed more complicated than any political situation he had ever encountered. Would his heart ultimately lead him to Lyra, the queen who represented everything calm and pure, or would he be drawn to Zara, the queen whose fiery spirit seemed to promise a future of conquest and strength? Ethan could no longer deny the truth. His heart was torn between the two. But in the depths of his soul, he knew that the choice he made would not just shape his own future, it would shape the destiny of both their worlds. The days on Voria seemed to stretch on endlessly as Ethan grappled with the weight of his decision. The tension between Queen Lyra and Queen Zara had grown unbearable, and his own internal struggle had reached a fever pitch. Every glance exchanged between the two queens, every whispered word, felt like a reminder of the impossible choice he was expected to make. No matter how much he tried to distance himself, he could feel the pull of both queens, each one offering him a future that was both alluring and dangerous. Ethan had spent sleepless nights wandering the palace grounds, lost in thought. He had come to Voria as a diplomat, yet now he felt as though he were being pulled into a much deeper conflict, one that was as personal as it was political. Lyra's calm wisdom and vision of peace had touched something deep within him, but Zara's fiery strength and unyielding determination had sparked a desire for power he hadn't known he possessed. Both queens had left their mark on him, and he could no longer deny the emotions swirling inside him. The decision loomed over him like a dark cloud. There was no clear answer. If he chose Lyra, he would be embracing a future of peace and unity, a path that would require patience and understanding. But if he chose Zara, he would be embracing strength, action, and the promise of a galaxy shaped by power. Both futures had their merits, but both came with sacrifices. The question was no longer about what was best for the galaxy. It was about what was best for his heart. It was late in the evening when the message arrived. The queens had summoned him to the Grand Hall, and Ethan knew that the time had finally come. This was no longer a game of diplomacy. It was a battle for his soul. As he made his way to the hall, the weight of his decision pressed down on him like never before. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, his thoughts racing with uncertainty. The Grand Hall was silent as Ethan entered, the only sound the soft echo of his footsteps on the marble floor. Both Lyra and Zara were standing at opposite ends of the room, their eyes fixed on him with a mixture of expectation and determination. For a moment, Ethan felt as though he were standing at the edge of a precipice, unsure whether to step forward or turn away. "I have made my decision," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of his words. Both queens stepped forward, their expressions unreadable, their eyes searching his face for the answer they had been waiting for. Lyra's voice was calm and gentle as she spoke. "Ethan, we have trusted you with the future of our worlds. We have shared our visions with you, our hopes and dreams. I understand the burden you carry, but I hope that you have seen the truth in my heart. That peace is not just a dream, but a path worth fighting for." Zara's voice was sharp, her gaze intense. "You know that peace is an illusion. Power is the only thing that will ensure our survival. I have shown you the strength of my vision, Ethan. The galaxy will bend to our will if we are strong enough to take it. Don't let weakness decide your future." The room was heavy with their words, but Ethan knew that his heart had already made its choice. Both queens were powerful in their own right, and both had a vision that was worth following. But only one path could truly resonate with him. The path he would choose had to be one where he could live with himself, where his heart would not be torn between conflicting desires. He took a deep breath, his mind clear now, and looked at both queens. He saw the compassion and wisdom in Lyra's eyes, and he felt the fire and conviction in Zara's gaze. But ultimately it was Lyra who had captured his heart, not just with her vision of peace, but with the understanding that peace required sacrifice, patience, and the ability to see the beauty in others. Lyra had shown him that strength wasn't just about power. It was about knowing when to act and when to listen. "Lyra," Ethan said, his voice firm with the weight of his decision, "you have shown me a path that I can follow with my heart. Peace may be fragile, but it is also the only way forward for us. I choose you, not because you are the easiest path, but because your strength is the strength of understanding and compassion. You have a vision for a united future, and that is the future I want to help build." Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time, a genuine smile crossed her face. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Ethan," she whispered, "I have never asked you to choose me. I have only asked you to choose what is right for us all, and you have chosen wisely." But as Lyra reached out to embrace him, Ethan felt a pang of sorrow for the choice he had made. He turned to Zara, whose expression was a mixture of shock and silent understanding. Her gaze met his, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something between them, Respect, perhaps, or the recognition that their paths were simply not meant to align. She did not speak, but there was no anger in her eyes, only a quiet resignation. "You are a brave man, Ethan," Zara said quietly, her voice steady. "I will not pretend to understand your choice, but I will respect it. The galaxy will remember you, not just for the choice you made, but for the courage it took to make it." Ethan nodded, his heart heavy but resolute. He had made his choice, and now it was time to move forward. The future of Voria, and perhaps of many worlds, rested on the foundation of that decision. He had chosen peace, not because it was the easy path, but because it was the path that would allow him to live with himself. And with that choice, he knew he had embraced his destiny, not as a diplomat caught in a conflict, but as a man who had chosen to follow his heart. As Lyra and Ethan stood side by side, the weight of their choice became clear. Together, they would build a future based on compassion and strength, a future where the galaxies could unite in peace, one step at a time. And though Ethan's heart had been torn, he knew that in the end, it had led him to where he truly belonged.